we live in crazy times which make Marx actual, but for this very reason we should criticize Marx. What do I mean by this? The problem with Marx is that precisely where he was right to such an extent that he couldn't even imagine how right he is. And that's why he... No, I will give you a simple example. You know the famous lines from Communist Manifesto that with capitalism everything solid melt into thin air, all stable forms are dissolved and so on, all stable hierarchies and so on. But would Marx have even imagined where we are today? For Marx, sexual gender coordinates were still stable. That even that is today experienced as something fluid and so on. Or even nature itself. For Marx, nature was still, in the typical modern European way, with all its storms, wild things, and so on, the stable background of our being. We humans are Promethean, we change things, and so on. But somehow Marx still counted that nature is this vast reservoir of forces and so on, is somehow strong enough to incorporate or to neutralize the destructive effects of our activity. Now, as we all know, living in the era called anthropocene and so on, you see, Marx was much more right. He should have also added in Communist Manifesto not only social forms, but even what we perceive as natural forms. Life on Earth, our gender, sexual identities are much more fluid, unnatural, and so on and so on. So this, I think, compels us to think more radically, to question many presuppositions. Another nasty thing, I want to provoke you politically. Marx mentions in Communist Manifesto also their all old patriarchal relations are, with developed capitalism, are undermined, rendered fluid, and so on and so on. And that's why I think, with all my respect for transgender movement and so on, that's why I am not surprised that transgender movement is so immensely popular among great corporate figures of the United States. You remember when month before Trump was elected, I mean, this is, I think, one of the reasons why he won. The main topic of big left liberal media, like New York Times and so on, what to do with transgender toilets. Is it 2, 3, is it single toilet, and so on and so on. And what made me a little bit suspicious is that all of them, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, name them, all of them fanatically, even the worst capitalist, like who is now, I forgot, after Steve Jobs, the boss of Apple, Tim Cook or who, they all fully supported it. I mean, we should accept it, yes, of course, but that's another topic. Transgender, Me Too. But they are not, I claim, inherently revolutionary. They fit perfectly the dynamic of late capitalist subjectivity, with this infinite plasticity and so on and so on. That's why I also have a problem, although personally we are in good relations, with my big philosophical nemesis, Judith Butler. I agree with her. She gives the correct description of what is happening today. You know, we no longer have, or less and less, this binary logic, predetermined sexual roles. We rediscover, recreate, repeat, reconstruct, invent our identities. My only problem is, what's so revolutionary about it? My reproach to her is that in some sense, she is simply describing modern late capitalist, typical modern late capitalist subjectivity. We live in a unique era where today, if we can construct this in a naive way, I simplify it. Today, ideology, and I don't mean a personalized ideology, but in the most elementary sense, when you're growing up and all the time later, what society is telling you to be, in a very naive way. What does it expect from you? My God, it's no longer obey your father, sacrifice yourself. It's what I ironically like to call spiritualized hedonism or enlightened Western Buddhism. Basically, the message is there are no higher causes worth sacrificing for. Enjoy life, but not in a stupid sense. Look into yourself, recreate yourself, explore your potentials, and so on and so on. Sometimes this also has very comic effects. For example, recently, not so recently, years ago, I was in Argentina, and I was told there a wonderful story from a historian of psychoanalysis, how things changed. Because as Foucault, I don't agree with him, I'm not a Foucauldian, but he's not an idiot. One should read him. So Michel Foucault noticed in a very nice way somewhere how the key decision, power decision of a psychoanalyst is what is a symptom that has to be analyzed as a clinical case, and what is just a normal state that doesn't deserve to be analyzed. You know, somebody comes to you, if you are an analyst, I am not, and you can guess why. Once a student, this is not a joke, unfortunately, once a student in New York told me, I would like to go to you in psychoanalysis. My idea was, you are really mad. Okay, but seriously, they told me that a very simple, stupid example. Half a century ago and more, a very traditional, stupid point, simplistic, with regard to promiscuity. If you were a man or a wife, promiscuous, sleeping around with others, it was considered pathological, something to be interpreted. You know, the idea was, what are you running from? Why this fear from stable relations, whatever? Did you have Oedipal problems, blah, blah. Today, they told me it's the opposite. I'm not joking. If you are faithful to your wife or husband, you'll get, oh my God, you have a traumatic fixation. This has to be things. So, you know what's the first lesson here? That it's not just a stupid game of words. Hysteria is historical. Forms of hysteria are always historically specified. In what sense? In the sense that hysteria is, my old Lacanian and at the same time Marxian thesis, hysteria is the elementary form of critique of ideology. Critique at ideology at its most elementary subjective level. Because as you already, I think, indicated, incidentally, I will not go into it, but that's what nonetheless makes me some kind, at least I hope, some kind of a feminist, because hysteria is feminine. If you want this opposition in types of pathology, obsessional neurosis is more masculine. There are even among some clinicians that I know great debates of can there be even a feminine obsessional neurotic. But what I want to say is, what is hysteria at its most elementary? It's an undermining of interpellation. By interpellation, I mean this mechanism elaborated by Louis Althusser of ideological identity, like society or figures of authority are telling you who you are, your symbolic identity. You are my wife, you are professor, you are pupil, you are revolutionary, you are a communist, whatever, and you recognize yourself in it. But the basic hysterical question is, but why am I what you are saying that I am? This elementary doubt, it's much more interesting skepticism. It's not about reality. Are things really like that? The question is, who am I? Am I really? You know, it's the old Juliet from Romeo and Juliet question, what's in that name, am I that name, and so on and so on.